So today we have with us Dianne Barker. Dianne is a level 5 international curling official who brings 35 years of experience to her role. She has officiated at numerous provincial, national, and international curling events, including the Olympic Games. Thanks for joining us, Dianne, and I guess we'll get started at the beginning. So how did you start officiating?
I was a competitive curler, and fortunately at that time, all the world champions seemed to be from BC, so we never got out of BC, but I did enjoy it. But I was also a phys ed teacher, and so it was just sort of a natural fit for me to be interested in rules and what was behind the sport. And they had the 1986 National Mixed here, and that was the start of officiating for curling. Because leading into the 1988 Olympics, officiating had to become formalized for curling, and so I took a level 1 course in order to help out with that.
Cool. Yeah, so curling I guess differs in the sense that, a referee in soccer is in the field of play, blowing their whistle, very actively maybe involved, or a judge in artistic swimming is right there kind of dictating the outcome almost of the event. How do you see your role as a curling official versus that of one in other sports potentially?
Well, I think one of the first statements in our training program is that we're enforcers, not legislators. We don't make the rules, we enforce them. We're obviously, as you said, not the whistle-blowing, flag-throwing kind of people. We're there to ensure a level field of play for everyone. So a real sound knowledge of the rules is important, and because then you can be comfortable enforcing them. Curling, again, is a gentleman or a gentlewoman's sport, but there are times when an official needs to step in. It's also, a lot of our role is peripheral, so that we're, again, ensuring the field of the fair field of play. For me as a chief umpire at events, a lot of my work is done before I ever arrive at the event. It's scheduling, it's making sure things are in place so that there is no opportunity for people to take advantage of loopholes.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, even though it might not be necessarily on the field of play,
if things are
work.
It's being proactive. It's ensuring that things are in place beforehand, and then you don't have to go out there and throw the whistle. I mean, we do the measurements obviously, and nationally we have electronic scoreboards, but provincially we still have, the Velcro numbers have to go up, so officials do that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The timing is very key as well. If I tell my timers when I'm training them, it's one of the most important jobs because it's visible to the curlers, and if they look and see that you're doing a good job, they forget about the time clocks. Mm-hmm. But if they look and see that mistakes are being made, it becomes a focal point, and then it distracts from the game of the players. And so, there's different avenues of officiating, and timing is one of them, and it's a very important part, because in Canada, if you run out of time, you get to throw the rest of your stones. The other team gets to throw the rest of their stones to try to win the game. At the Worlds, first one that runs out of time loses. Yeah. So it's very, very serious there.
Totally. Awesome. As I mentioned earlier, you've been head official at major events, and were an official at the Olympics previously. So if you wouldn't mind maybe describing that experience, what it's like,
Sure.
at the Olympics.
It was a real honor to be invited to do the Olympics. I did the Olympics in Vancouver, Sochi, and Pyeongchang, Korea, and it's just a very special thing, very special opportunity. The field of play itself doesn't change that much because it's still a curling event. It's like walking out on a volleyball court. The size of the volleyball court is still the same, but all the stuff that goes around it is so different. Or you may have, mm-hmm. even with curling, you may have 5 people in the stands in Europe, and you may have 5,000 in the stands in Canada. So it's it does change the dynamics of the event. Mm-hmm. The Olympics being multi-sport as well was very special. I had the opportunity to go and watch some other events and see Canada win gold medals in other events. And I mean, that's not something I would have had the opportunity to do had I not been at the Olympics. But being there, and especially when Canada won gold medals, is a very special time. But at the Olympics, it's different than the Worlds in that a Canadian umpire at the Olympics cannot umpire a Canada game, as a Swedish umpire cannot cannot umpire a Swedish game. So we never had a lot of real close interaction with the Canadian teams other than seeing them and sort of good luck as you walk past kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the world events, it's different. I mean, well, as chief umpire, I deal with all the teams, but as a game umpire, you go on whatever sheet you're assigned to. And, you know, it may be Canada, it may not be. So it's a little bit different at the Olympics.
Cool. Yeah, speaking of World Championships, most recently you were the head official at the 2021 World Women's Curling Championships in a bubble setting in Calgary. You know, we keep throwing around the word unprecedented over the last year, but I think that was pretty unprecedented. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind kind of describing that experience and how you managed challenges that arose.
Well, I think one of the key things was all the work that went into the event in the bubble for all 7 events that were there, that went into the event ahead of time. I think unprecedented, it's been used a lot, COVID-free, I think, is what our goal was.
Right.
We didn't accomplish that in that there were some incidents of COVID exposure, but not anything that was caused by curlers, which is great. A couple curlers arrived, they'd had negative tests in another country before they left, and when they got here they tested positive, but again, COVID-free, they were kept entirely separate from the rest of the field of play, and the games were able to go on. When we had a situation at the Women's Worlds with the broadcasters, I mean, it was dealt with very immediately and very efficiently, and you know, the players and all the personnel involved were kept away from the broadcasters, even after most of them had come back. I mean, it was exponential. It started out with 3, and then the next day it was 4, and then the next day it was 7, and so there was no way they were coming back into the field of play, and they didn't want to either. I mean, they don't want to infect anybody, and they, you know, as we've learned through COVID, you don't always know that you're a carrier until later on. So we were able to resume play without broadcast, and then we were able to resume play near the end of the week with broadcast, but the broadcasters were up on the concourse where there were no spectators or curlers or volunteers. So you know, it was handled very well. It was challenging, to be sure. The curlers were, I have to say, to a person, were extremely cooperative. It meant extra COVID tests for us all. It meant waiting, you know, postponing things until the results of the COVID tests came back. I can't imagine, well, I imagine there's people that have had more COVID tests in a week, but it was quite, it was an addition to what we normally do, even with the sanitizing. I mean, the umpires have a role as dealing with the field of play, but our role expanded because now we were sanitizing stones, we were sanitizing tables and chairs after every draw. We were making sure that masks were on when people tried to leave the field of play to go to the washroom. You know, we would stop them and have a supply of masks there if they'd forgotten their own, just so they, you know, because they're on time clocks. So we made those available. It was separate water dispensers for every team. It was, well, you know, Erin, because you were there for the Women's Worlds, and I think it even got tighter as we moved on because of the COVID exposures that we'd had. Just the different placement, having coaches at both ends. And quite honestly, I think there's some things that happened as a result of the bubble that will stay as policy or procedure going forward. I think the idea of having the 2 teams at opposite ends of the ice is something that will stay. Because the coaches loved it. They could have private conversations with their teams. They didn't feel jeopardized in any way by any exposure that the other team might have had.